Okay, Maddie, welcome. Maddie, tell us about the Value Collective.
Sure, yes. Okay, I won't take too much of your time. But yeah, my name is Maddie. I'm co-leading this initiative. It's called Value Collective. We are dedicated to supporting people realizing work that is valuable but not profitable. So we center basically non-financial value, which can be like artistic value, social value, ecological value, cultural value, a lot of things that maybe don't fit into the market and can't really be facilitated through market mechanisms, are maybe actively marginalized by a very market-centric economy and society. So this is kind of what we talk about. And one of the things that we do is we coordinate access to a collective space, which is where this event is being hosted today, and essentially are building a community around non-financial value creation. We have a few other sub-initiatives related to alter economic organizing, so including we're working towards like a time bank here for the community at this space, the convent. It's called La Cité des Hospitaliers. And then also some research components into measuring non-financial value, working with different community organizations who we host as residents and try to support in different alter economic ways. So I'll leave it at that. I'm going to hand out just like our newsletter sign-up sheet for the people who are here in person, and then maybe I'll just post a link to the website in the Zoom. Let's see, I don't know how to do that. Maybe I'll leave that to Keith.
Great.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie. So yeah, Maddie has the Value Collective has been offering space to research for the front lines and some of the community groups that we work with, as well as our volunteers. So if any volunteers, research for the front lines, volunteers in Montreal want to use the space sometimes to work on research for the front lines, work together in a co-working kind of situation, let us know. We're looking at starting a Friday afternoon co-working session. And if anyone who wants to get in on that who's not in Montreal, we can zoom you in to those co-working sessions. Okay, so let us hear next from Christiane from the Concordia Social Justice Center. And hey, great to see people. Yeah, sitting down in Montreal, awesome. Hey, Christiane.
Hi, thank you. Thank you all for being here. The Social Justice Center is located at Concordia University. Our mandate is to support social justice research and, of course, social justice struggles. It's co-directed by Bengi Akbulut and by Pablo Gilabert. And we are offering bursaries for graduate students. So if there are any graduate students from Concordia in the room, our call for application is closing on September 22nd. So send me an email if you're interested. And we are very happy to support the work of research for the front lines. Thank you.
Thank you, Christiane. Okay, so I'm just going to reiterate the plan for the evening for the folks who just filed in. Soon, I'm going to introduce our guest, our trainer for the evening, Tim Groves. Tim is going to give us a Investigative Research 101 lesson for the next 45 minutes or so. We're going to hold our questions till a Q&A session that'll follow Tim's lesson, his teachings. And then at that point, we'll have an opportunity to ask Tim questions. Afterwards, there'll be the opportunity to stick around either on the Zoom or in person. The Montreal folks have a benefit because there are snacks. There's vegan snacks, including pumpkin pie tarts. So stick around for that. But the folks on Zoom also stick around. We're going to have an opportunity to get to know each other, see who's around, see who's working on what kind of projects. And Tim might be able to stick around too and answer any additional questions that are still lingering. So that's the plan. Does that sound all right? Okay, so before I pass it on to Tim, I just want to introduce Research for the Front Lines for anyone who doesn't know. It's we're about a year old. It's a new initiative we started last year. Keith and I are co-coordinating it. And the work we do is providing research support for communities and movements on the front lines of the fight for environment and climate justice across so-called Canada. And we support in various ways, including mobilizing huge community of research volunteers who are donating or volunteering their time and labor and skills on community and movement-led research projects. We have volunteers, we have communities and movements we work with. We also have research mentors, such as Tim. So folks who are really busy, maybe don't have tons of time to volunteer, although Tim does that too, but who also, we can pick their brains when we have a project, research need, but we're not sure about how to go about a certain method or find a certain kind of information. Then we have mentors and we pick their brains. So Tim is one of those. He's a research mentor with Research for the Front Lines. And we try to do trainings every couple of months, so that or once a month, we're trying to do where we're building our skills. It's an offering to the research volunteers as well as a broader community, anyone interested in doing work to support frontline struggles for environmental and climate justice. So that's Research for the Front Lines. Maybe Keith can pop the website in. We have a website, we have Facebook stuff, and we will have future trainings that will be hybrid like this. So that's Research for the Front Lines. Thanks for listening to my spiel. And now I'm going to introduce Tim. So Tim Groves is a longtime investigative researcher, been a fan for a long time. He does a lot of incredible work at the service of social justice. He's done a lot of work with Grassy Narrows, with Wet'suwet'en and other frontline communities who are waging important struggles right now that are transformative. And Tim is one of these folks who's doing amazing work in support, mobilizing or using research, investigative research as a form of allyship and solidarity. So we've already learned lots from Tim, working with him over the last couple of months. He's helped on various projects, including one involving Brent, who we see on Zoom, and the Peace Brigades International, doing some work in support of human rights defenders in South America who are facing human rights violations because of Canadian-owned companies. So with no further ado, I'll pass it over to Tim. You can introduce yourself more if you want, or just go into it. Up to you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm going to load a PowerPoint presentation off of like Google Slides, but I'm just in the chat. I'm just entering it now. The thing, you don't have to look at it now, but you can like open it and have the link there. It's probably best to follow along with me, not on your own, but like that way you have a copy of the presentation to look at afterwards. So you're not like scrambling to take notes or whatever. So I will now try and launch this presentation. Here we go. Give me a sec. Okay. There we go. Slideshow. Okay. So welcome everyone. So I guess Jen introduced me. I'm passionate about investigative research and I love like supporting amazing causes with it. And I'm really like sharing the skills I've learned. So what to expect in the workshop? I think the idea that I have is that everyone is going to leave with some new skills that they can use in their research. It's mostly going to focus on online research, but I will spend some time talking about some of the other ways that you could do research that aren't online. And I'm going to like use a lot of like slides, examples, pictures of things on the internet, like search tools and search terms you can try. And then I will try and make some time. I'll check in on the time and see where we're at, but like talk a little bit of some of like the thinking and thoughts about how to approach research. So that's the general goal that I have. And I'm going to try and go like, there's a lot to cover. So I'm going to try and go like reasonably fast. And the goal is not that everyone picks up every bit of information, but that everyone leaves with some new skills that add to their research game, like few new things in their toolbox. So to start it off, yeah, I'm going to talk about being a good online researcher, using like search syntax and operators, understanding URLs, finding deleted websites and information, using databases, and then a little bit of like going beyond online research. I have made a long list of like lots of thoughts about what makes a good researcher, online researcher. And I'm not going to read through all of these now, but I've taken this slide and the next slide and put in them later in the presentation. So towards the end, if there's time, I can go over a lot of these ideas. But I sort of want to, more than that, jump in to like looking at some examples. But I'll say that in terms of like, I'll just read out the first 3 concepts, which is like, being a good researcher comes from understanding like what sorts of information exist online and how it is compiled and organized, and then understanding how you can access that information. And I think to do some of that, you have to understand a bit about how search engines work. So the way search engines work is that there are like robots, sometimes they're called spiders, they're computer programs that go and try and visit as many different websites as possible. They search all over the internet, and every time they go to a website, they take a snapshot, like a photo with all the text, copy it, and keep it in something called the cache. So that's like, there's a whole series for every website, there's a cache. So when you're searching the internet, you're not live searching the websites, you're searching the most recent time that a robot from Google or Bing and some other search engine has gone to that website. And then each of those caches are put into an index so that when you put in a search term, an algorithm sort of like figures out based on what you put in, what results to deliver to you. So those are the basics of how a search engine works. But now I want to get into these sort of like operators that people can use when they are doing a search. So I think like quotes is one that everyone knows. If you have like a name you're looking for, you can put it in quotes. But there's a whole bunch of these other things that you can add into search, and they will provide you with like ways for the search engine to like look for different types of things or exclude different types of information. Like I'll show you some examples, and I'll start with quotes. So people know this, you can put a name in quotes and say, I'm looking for this particular name. And instead of looking for, you know, Tim sat in an apple grove or went to many apple groves throughout the day, it'll look for those 2 words together in sequence. So one way, that's like a pretty basic way of using this. One way that people often don't think about using quotes is putting a whole sentence in quotes. So I came across this website several years ago where it was part of an article, and then it has in the bottom, you'll see in highlight, says, to read the full text of this article, like sign up for our site. And so in this case, I just copied one of the whole sentences from this, put it into a search engine. And when I put it in, there were other places where that same article was posted for free. So they just put it in their paid database or like paywall database, they've taken it. So anytime you're like, if you have a government document and you want to see if some version of it exists online, you can take a whole sentence and put it in quotes and see where else does this appear. So that's like one example. There's lots of creative ways to use these different operators. So I'm just going to kind of quickly give like 1 or 2 examples for each. The minus sign. This means exclude this information. So if you want stuff on Penguins, but not the Pittsburgh Penguins, you could put a minus sign in front of Pittsburgh. What you miss is stuff that says, oh, we went to visit the penguins at the Pittsburgh Zoo. But so much stuff is about Pittsburgh Penguins that excluding Pittsburgh is often a good choice to narrow your search and not be bombarded with just so much information to look over. Similar example is when I was looking up stuff back in the day about the G8 summit, there's a lot of stuff about the Pontiac G8. So instead of doing G8 on its own, I'd write G8 minus Pontiac. I guess it's a car, the Pontiac G8, I think. But that's kind of the way you can use the minus sign. This is the asterisk or wildcard. And the way this works is it fills in a gap. So you could write 3 star mice, and you would get 3 dead mice, 3 blind mice, 300 mice. So all sorts of different examples, like ways you can fill in what is in the middle. It could be anything. It could be 1 word. It could be a couple words. But, you know, I often did this, like you can sometimes ask a question using this. So you'll write a sentence like Saturn has star moons, and you'll get an answer. And the way this is good is that, like, if you'll see in this example, you see that there's no one answer to how many moons Saturn has. This one says Saturn has 83 moons, Saturn has 82 moons, currently Saturn has 53 confirmed moons. So you'll see that there's many different ways to, like, the answer to that question is not a simple one. And doing that search, just looking at those search results on the page, you can see the range of different answers. You could also use this for finding like middle names. So you could do a search for someone, but if their middle name, you're doing it in quotes and their middle name is there, you might miss it. So it's sometimes you can put that star in there and you'll find like more complicated names, or like names where the middle name is added. So if people write, you know, their middle name in there, the quotes on its own will exclude that if the middle name is in the middle and you just did the first and last name. This is an old example. This is back in like 2012 or something, 2013. I did this. Facebook has star employees, trying to, like, we couldn't find the answer quickly. This is how we did the search. We searched like this. The answer came up. And then this was yesterday. The number has gone up significantly, obviously. But so that's some ways to use the wildcard. This is the OR operator. And it needs to be capitalized. So you capitalize these letters, and it means you can like have one word or another. And it actually is like you put a word on one side, you put a word on the other side. But what it is looking for is the word on one side of or the word on the other side of the or both. So it's a little different than like a Boolean or. It's just looking at the stuff on either side. And as you're using quotes, it gets a little more. It's the stuff in the quotes on either side. So here's some examples. You could use like area codes. So instead of like just looking up, if you wanted to find people who are using a specific phone number, but you want to use all the area codes for Montreal or all the area codes for Toronto, you could put all of those in and then not just be searching 514, but also 263. And I seem to have made a mistake on the slide and added 514 again. But you guys get the idea that you could have multiple area codes when you're doing a search. And I will, here's another example is like, if you're searching a government website or some corporate website and you want to find like different contracts or whatever, instead of just write it limited, you could write limited or Inc. So you're looking for companies that end such and such limited and companies that end such and such Inc. So or lets you like pick, if you have a page that just has limited, it will still show up. If you have a page that just has Inc, it'll still show up. So this is the way or is useful. And then this is probably the most important tool for when you are doing internet searches, because usually when you are using Google and putting stuff in the search bar, you're searching the whole internet. And that's a lot of information. But this is a way to refine what you're looking for. And it works in several ways. So the most simple way is that you pick a website and say, I want to search only this specific website. So this is site:/NASA.gov Saturn. So here's all the times that the word Saturn appears on the website NASA.gov. Whereas searching Saturn on the whole internet is much faster. We've narrowed this significantly by just looking at one website. There's still a lot of results, but that is like the way that this tool is useful, is that you're no longer looking at everything. You've narrowed your search significantly. So another way to use this is it doesn't just have to be looking at a specific website, but like in this example, it's looking at a specific directory of a specific website. So it's within Enbridge.com, there's a folder, there's a like a subdirectory called just dash, and then a subdirectory called media, and a subdirectory called emb, and then a subdirectory called documents. So we're searching only in the documents section for things that say line 3. And there could be other things that say line 3 and other parts of the Enbridge website, but we're looking at like one part of one website. So it's narrowing even deeper. And then the other way that site:/ works is you can use site:, to have something like look at a specific domain. To look at a specific top level domain. I think that's the word. All my terminology is getting all jumbled in my head. But if websites that end .cu are Cuban government or not Cuban government, websites that are registered in Cuba. So you could say, I only want to look at websites that are registered in Cuba. Or you could say only .fr for France, or only .org, or only .edu, or only .mil for US military. So the different endings, you can search them specifically using this tool. And one of the ways I use this most often as a researcher in Canada is using this search. So most Canadian government departments end with site:/gc.ca. So that ending .gc.ca says this is a website that belongs to a Canadian government website. And there'll be many different examples, but by doing this, I'm searching the RCMP, I'm searching Transport Canada, I'm searching the Canadian Forces, I'm searching like Canadian Natural Resources, I'm searching like all sorts of different government websites for federal government, all get searched using this one tool. So that one search. So that is why site:, is like so powerful, is because usually you search all over the internet and it lets you look at specific parts of the internet. So I'm like, we're going to get a little later into some more advanced ways to use this, but those are some of the basic ways to use site:. And then this one works by typing either file type or ext. Actually, I'm going to go back a sec, just really briefly. If you notice when I have this heading site:, these are all lowercase letters, and that's important. If you write, like the or has to be capitalized, the site:, and these next examples I'm going to give you all have to be lowercase letters. So I just wanted to flag that so people can see that. Yeah, so let me get back to this. So file type or ext, they do the same thing, and they let you search for a specific type of file. So an example is I'm looking at the City of Toronto's website for stuff about the G20, but I only want to look at PDF documents. So file type lets you narrow that down. Or another example is if you're getting into stuff about mapping, there's different typing mapping stuff that you can load in like Google Earth or whatever. So file type KML or file type KMZ are ways of finding different interactive map files that people have uploaded to the internet. If there's time at the end, I can talk a little bit more about what a KML file is and how you can load it. But the point is that there's different types of files that are stored in different parts of the internet, and the ways that you can find them are by using this this operator that says file type : and then the name of the type of file. And I will talk a little bit more later about some of the types of files we can look for, but for now I'm just introducing the tool. And then I think I didn't put a heading, but this tool is in URL ::. So as well as doing like site:, and file type, in URL : says I want to search this term somewhere, but it's not in the text of the document, it's in the URL of the document. I'm going to spend a lot of time soon talking about URLs, but like an example in this is that like government websites often have French and English. So in this case, I'm saying, hey, I want this term ENG to be in the URL. And I know that like for this particular website, anything that's in French has FRA in the URL, and anything that is in English has ENG. So I could narrow that using this tool. And here's another thing I'm looking for in this search. I'm looking for search engines for pilots in Canada. And I'm thinking about how am I going to find a database of pilots in Canada? I'm thinking, well, maybe they put search in the URL. That's like a possibility. There's other ways to find databases, and we'll talk about them later. But like putting that there, it's like I'm only searching the URL for the term search. The other parts, it's looking anywhere on the website, but inURL is the saying search the URL. So yeah, so those are the operators. I know I went really fast. I just want to get to the like, make sure there's time to get to the Q&A and that everyone gets this. So we can go over more of these examples later, and some of it's going to come up a bit now. I'm just going to take a drink of water, and I saw some people came in late, so I'm just pasting again into the chat this presentation, the slides that I'm presenting, so people can, you know, save that website and look at these later at your convenience. Oh, sorry, folks. Okay, so in all of this, we've looked at some of these operators, and I've mentioned URLs. So I think maybe people, so I think if people, can people see my, I'm hoping people can see my cursor, but this bit at the bottom, google.com/search Q equals Canada plus pilots, like at the very top, that the bar, the search bar that names the like name of the website, that is the URL of a website. So I think to be good at doing online research, understanding URLs lets you be better at looking at a website and knowing what you're looking at. So I've sort of drawn up, I picked a website and it's got a few different parts to it. So often website starts with this HTTP:, we'll see in red at the top here. And like, that just says, you know, it's often like a prefix that goes in front. And then many websites, but not all, will have a www, like World Wide Web. And it's just saying, these bits at the beginning are saying, hey, this is like the stuff, the preamble before we get to the search of what the actual name of the website is. So now we have the name of the actual website, which is rcaf-arc-forces.gc.ca. That's like the website, but forces.gc.ca is like the actual like name of the website for the Canadian Forces, Canadian Armed Forces. For the Royal Canadian Air Force, this is called a subdomain. So you'll see there's like a dot there, and the things that come before the dot are considered a subdomain. So they're a little like trickier to figure out how to search that, but we can, if there's time, I could go into some of the more detailed stuff, but I'll just flag that those are a different type of website. Not all websites are structured that way, but then they are, you have to like incorporate that into how you're doing searches using site:. And then this is the gc.ca is the top level domain, and the second level domain. These are saying, hey, this is like the suffix at the end of the website that says this is a website. So .ca is the top level domain, .gc is the second level domain. And then you'll see within the file, we'll have like a directory, and then another, like a subdirectory, and then another subdirectory. And then we'll have the name of a file, and then the type of file. So alert is the name of the file, and page is the type of file. And when you're looking at URLs, there's all sorts of clues to what are going on. So I think it's like good to look, like here we have like a Google search, and then the actual search terms, like the information that comes up here, google.com.ca, there's a question mark. So the stuff before the question mark is not dynamic, but the things after the question mark start to be dynamic. So they're providing information. So it says source ID equals Chrome. So somehow they know that the browser I was using to do this search is Chrome. And they say and they give another bit of information and another bit of information. So I don't know what all these different bits of information are, but I know that they're saying like different categories of information that it's telling the web browser, and they're sorting them. And sometimes I'll go in and like play with these and change like =1 to =0 and see what happens. Does anything change? And I'll get a little to that later, but like, then it has this hashtag, and then it says query equals, and then it has site:un.org plus file type : ppt plus Somalia. So that gives a lot of information in there. And looking at like search results, they often have this sort of like setup, a similar sort of format. And then maybe with Google, it isn't that interesting, but with some search engines, you'll see this and you'll have a thing that'll say like number of results per page, and they'll say 10, but if you change it to 50, you'll get 50 results per page. So this is called like URL hacking, where instead of like clicking through websites on links, you can play around with what's in the URL and get different types of results to come up. So this might make sense in this next example where there's a news.gc.ca/web says articles in English.do, then it's question mark, and then it says number ID. And then it has the number ID of the article. And what you can do is just say, hey, here's one article and its ID, but what happens if I go down a number or up a number or down 2 numbers? So sometimes they skip numbers, so it's not like necessarily down 1, but you can play around. And oftentimes, like I found stuff where there's information that like the International Association of Police had like conference presentations that are supposed to be private, but they put them on the public internet and they just thought it was protected because they didn't link to it. I was able to find it by just playing around with the numbers and got all sorts of information that was supposed to be hidden. They thought was hidden. They didn't hide it very well. It was legally very available, but by just tinkering with the URL, I was able to have stuff that they didn't know they'd made public. I'll just note in this next line, www.1, there are different types of beginnings. So www is like the most common one, but there's www1, wx, there's different ways that websites are structured. They put different things in there. So if you were to do like site:/toronto.ca, or site:/www.toronto.ca, you would miss stuff that was www1 you would miss this website, www1.toronto.ca, if you'd search site:/www.toronto.ca. So putting the www in the site: works, but you might be missing documents. So I just wanted to flag that. And then as we're looking through this, you'll see different like acronyms, these sort of like letters. So not sure, I think PRD is Parks and Recreation Department. So trying to look at the URL, seeing these numbers and figuring out, is there a way to like interpret from the URL what these letters mean? Because knowing it means Parks and Recreation Department gives you information so that when you're looking at the URL, you can understand more what you are looking at. And then this other number I highlighted here, this like blue 13, I'm imagining that is a year and that they have different information for different years. So this is probably an old example that I used where I grabbed all these URLs, but what happens if you go 2014 or 2015? You get new information. What kinds of information happens when you change the example? And the same thing in this next example, 2013, it's clearly that they're storing documents by year. So understanding the way they structured that, that website, you can see that from the URL. And then, yeah, this last example, I can't remember. I think when I first made this slide, I did know exactly what this stood for, but you can see that there's like an acronym here, and trying to interpret these acronyms and figure out what they stand for is a way that you can get more information. And again, in this website, we can see they said this is an English document. If we were like, oh, we want to get the same document, but in French, you could just change the FNG to FRA. And like, it's not always the case, but I would say 95% of the time, the document exists in both languages. Like that's why it's made. They've done it duplicate, the same information is supposed to be there in both languages. If you read better in French than English and you see the document in English, you can try being like, hey, let me get the French version just so that I can like read it better. So those are some examples of URL, like understanding URLs, but also how to do URL hacking. I think I did this slightly out of order, so I'm just going to jump to the next slide. Another type of URL hacking is backslashing. So in this case, we have a directory. And then what we're going to do is we're going to like take the top bit off the directory and press enter and see what comes up. And then we'll take the next bit off and the next bit off and the next bit off. And you might find sometimes parts of a website that you didn't know were there that become really interesting by doing this sort of like removing bits from the URL and getting to lower parts of the website. Sometimes it's a dead link, and other times you get more bits of information. And I'm just going to jump to this again. So I said earlier, we looked at like file type where you could search different types of files. When you were doing that kind of search, these are some of the like more common types of files. So PDF, doc, docx, and then like the open office version is ODT. We have PowerPoint, PowerPoint-X, and the open office version is ODP. XLS is spreadsheets, SLSX is spreadsheets, and ODS is spreadsheets. CSV is another like common spreadsheet format. And then the other ones I already talked about are these map files, KML and KMZ. There's a lot of other files. Sometimes I'm searching for shape files, but I've left media files like MP3 off this list, and Google has set it up because they're trying to like not allow pirating, or they don't want to get on the bad side of people who are against pirating or whatever. They've set it up so when you use file type, you can't search file type AVI, nothing will come up. But if you search for most files, any like non like audio media and video media files, usually like the tool works except in specific circumstances. So there are a lot of types of files, JSON, there's all sorts of different types, and it doesn't matter if they even really exist. You put file type and the ending, it just looks for that part of a URL. It knows what the part is, and it says, does this show up here? So you can play around with all different types, but knowing how different file types work and like what sort of information is stored in them is what allows you to like do good searching. So I know that like if I'm looking for something and I'm like looking for like a quick summary of the information that's going on, where it's really been like boiled out and summarized for me, I'm going to search for PowerPoint presentations, because PowerPoint presentations, like they often go into a lot of detail, but they're like jam-packed with like quick bullet point information. So finding a PowerPoint can be really valuable. PDFs are usually more like the official documents, whereas doc or docx documents are usually like the documents that are like the draft documents where people are still working on them. And so those are some of the different types that you can use, and they're parts of the URL that is worth understanding, like what kinds of information fit into each of these different types of files. So I had talked earlier about these operators, but I want to return to a few of the operators, because site colon, file type, and inurl specifically search the URL of a website. So in this case, we're looking at this Parks website. But as I'm looking at it, if we look at this website, most of these URLs have the word facilities. This one doesn't. It has activity complex, but most of them have facilities. So you'll look in the next, in this next slide, I've decided to exclude facilities from the search, and we start seeing other types of files that show up within the website. So they're like activity complex, swimming, general. And so you get other parts of a website by playing around with these site colon, inurl, file type. And then some of these other operators that we've looked at already can be integrated into this. So in this example, I'm using the wildcard, but I'm using it in the URL, not in the document. So I'm saying, hey, look in toronto.ca parks and look for things that are like subdirectories that are 4 levels deep that end with index. And as you start going through, you see there's all sorts of different index pages. So I looked at this website and seen, oh, there's a lot of, like, each area of the website has a file within the subdirectory called index.htm that gives me information of what's in that section. And this is a way to find all the indexes. So playing with that wildcard, and then like this has a couple other examples of how to integrate some of the other operators into a URL search. So in this case, I'm saying, show me everything from site:/gc.ca or canada.ca. So you'll see there's like this top example. It doesn't say gc.ca. It's a transportcanada.canada.ca. And some Canadian government, more and more often, Canadian government websites are also canada.ca. So this or says, let me search both of these at once. And then I'm searching for the word drone, but I'm not really interested in what the RCMP has to do with drones. So I'm going to say minus site:/rcmp-jfc.gc.ca so that it knows I don't want to look at the RCMP website. So yeah, so this is the ways that you can like integrate operators into searching URLs. And then I have one more tool that is really good for understanding and searching URLs, and I'm just going to foreshadow it, which is to say it's going to come up in the next section, but it's like the Wayback Machine has an advanced search function that is good for understanding URLs. And I'm going to get to what the Wayback Machine is, and I'll get to the way it can be used for URLs in the next section, which is finding deleted information. So let me have one more drink of water. Okay. So, finding deleted information. I mentioned when I talked about like how a search engine works, I'd mentioned the cache. And when you are searching, you know what, I'm gonna just see if I can, nope. Here we go. So here's a search. I'm searching the word test, and there's this little button next to the search results that has this like 3 dots. If I click on that, there's a button at the bottom here that says cached. And when I click on this, it'll bring me to a version of the website where it's got that version, but it says, this is a snapshot of the page as it appeared on September 8th at 7:44 Greenwich Mean Time. So it's like a photo of the last time that that web page was visited by a robot. And it was pretty recently. I mean, I'm not good at my time zones enough to know how many hours ago that was, but it wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that many hours ago. Let me see if I can, there we go, get back to the workshop. So I don't think I put a slides in that showed how you access the cache, but the cache is something that you can access on different websites. And like I said, that was a few hours ago, but there are occasions where a website doesn't get visited that often. So I'm going to tell a little story. This is an older story, but some people from New Brunswick, one of the universities there, asked for some help. There was a article that was posted by CBC that included some quotes from different government officials about what was going on in the university. And it has this on the side, this thing says external link. And there's this thing, GB government, Landsbridge, a new government success story. So they said this is a success story, and then they canceled the program. So student activists wanted to get a copy of what was on that website. CBC had it, but once the CBC article was up, they deleted it from their website. So when I went and I clicked on this link, it brought me to, you can see how old this was. It's an old version of Google, but it would bring me this thing that says like, your search did not come up with any results. Like we couldn't find anything there. And when this is searching the cache, and then this is searching the website itself, it's like, hey, there's nothing here. Sorry, this page doesn't exist. And if I search this page using Google, there's no search results. They can't come up with a page. But what I realized is that Google is not the only search engine. So I went and I tried Bing and I did the exact same search. And it did come up with the link. But when I click on it, the link is still dead. But what I realized is that I could go to this page and, you know, you see here it is from an old Bing page, cached page it, and I click on that. Oh, and it brings me to a copy of the story where I could go and save a copy. So one way to find deleted information is by using the cache. And it's only when a website isn't visited that often that the cache becomes important. Because if the robot is really efficient in visiting all the time, you're not going to get a recent, like an old enough version. It's when the robot is inefficient and hasn't visited recently that this tool becomes really useful. And it might be that Google has visited recently, but Bing isn't as good a search engine, so it's more useful in this way of finding deleted information. So that's one way of finding deleted information. But the most common way for finding deleted information is to use this tool called the Wayback Machine. And it's put out by a group called archive.org, or the Internet Archive. And you'll see this is the front page of their website. They have two search bars. I'm going to talk later about this search bar at the bottom, but this one at the top, this is Wayback Machine. It says enter URL. And if you enter a URL into that, you will get old copies of the webpage. So here's again, there's another old story, old slides from an old presentation, but there was this guy named Gary McHale who was harassing people at Six Nations. And people had found this old website he did. And at the bottom here, you'll see it says, like, see our work at GaryMcHalePhotos.com. And if you clicked on Gary McHale's photo.com, it was just like it was a dead page. The page didn't exist anymore. But here it is in the Wayback Machine. And you can see it has all the different years that they've taken photos of it. And so this group, Internet Archive, they have their own cache of all these different web pages that have been visited. But instead of only giving you the most recent version, they've kept every version. So you can go back and find versions of a website from many different years. And this bar graph shows, hey, look, they didn't visit at all in 2009, but they visited a few times in 2010, and they visited a lot in 2004. So we'll just go and like look, and here's a copy of the website from 2004. And so this says Canadian Christian publications that gave information to people that they didn't have before about like, who was this person and what was he about? And he was being really quiet on his identity at this point in whatever, 2011 or 13 or whatever. But back in 2004, he had a very different way that he described himself and his history. And people were able to like use that information. And I'm not sure how it was used, but like that is an example of how this stuff can be put out there. So here's a copy of like McGill's website from 2004. So you can see like, you often see like the old web designs and stuff. But like, that's not that useful. So like, here is an example, like, yeah. So here's an example of like the human resources department at McGill. And I just, looked at this, and it's got like the collective agreement, which expired in April 30th, 2020. So you could click on that and get a copy of the collective agreement. But if you wanted to go back and find an old copy of the collective agreement, you could put this into the Wayback Machine, and here's like 2017, and they have the collective agreement. I'm not sure it's actually linked in this time, but you could go back and find old information. So the front page of a website isn't the most useful, but it's like if there's a website that has useful information within a page within a website that has useful information, looking at old copies of that page, the useful information might change over time. So that's a way that you can use this stuff in different ways. Here's Google in 1998, just showing you an example of like this tool. So yeah, so this is the Wayback Machine. You can go and look at an old copy, and not every page is cataloged. It's not as good as Google for capturing everything. And if anyone asks the Wayback Machine to remove their website, they do it. So things could disappear or whatever. But in general, it has lots of like a lot of websites are on there. And it's a way of finding lots of old information from a website. So I said earlier, there's like some advanced searchers. So when we're here, I search the tai.ca and you'll see it says calendar here in like red. But if you click over, this gives different dates of when things have been on the website. If you click over on the website to this one at the far side, so here it says URLs, and if you click on URLs, now it shows for the tai.ca, it shows every URL that they have cataloged within the page. And then there's this box at the side here that says filter results by URL. And so if you go into that and you start typing something in, it will in real time change the list of results that are coming up. So I put in fracking and you'll see this is the same list of URLs, but they've only shown me the URLs that have the word fracking somewhere in the URL. It could be anywhere in the URL. But in this way, like when you're using Google, you don't get quite as quick a visual display of what is going on in real time, changing really quickly within a website. This is a way to really quickly look and get a sense of the different ways that a website is structured. So we'll see like, oh, look, 2019 / 03 or like analysis. We could put an analysis. We could put in different words into this, this filter, and it will give us a sense of what is going on the website. So a way to like interpret websites that's a bit different than how you would interpret them from Google, where it's one result and then the next result. This gives you a lot of stuff shown really quickly. Yeah, so that is the main like most useful tool in the Wayback Machine, but there is another one, this one that says changes. Oh yeah, changes. So up at red, I clicked on changes. And this way it can show you like what days the website that they visited, when it changed. And I think like the dark blue is like it changed a lot and the light blue is it changed a little. And like there's a scale and you can see like how much a website is changing over time. So this is a way of like looking at the Wayback Machine data in a different way, where it takes a bit of like, you can see how often the changes are being made and get like a historical view of like when to look at the website to look for changes. Because when you have that calendar view, so let's go back to like, you could be like, oh, wow, they've done all sorts of stuff on their website, but when did they make the biggest changes? And you can see, oh, I'll look at this date, I'll look at this date. And it's a different way to like scroll the collection. But this is the way to really look at like finding deleted information all around the internet. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to databases. Give me one sec. Okay. Whoop. So. Okay, so something that is like one of the most useful things on the internet is finding databases. So you could search like the open internet, but there's all sorts of people who have like put lots of work into collecting their own sets of data. And some of it you can find through Google searches, but some of it you need to be using the specific database to access that information. And so I would put these into like, I mean, you could get into more categories, but like in general, I put these into two categories. One is like open databases and one is subscription databases. So some databases are behind a paywall and some databases, you just have to visit the right part of the internet, put in the search terms and different results will show up. But when Google visits those sites that are open, they don't know what to put in the search bar. So they can't get, it's not like when their robot visits each site, they just click on each link and visit, but they don't know what to put in the search bar. So they don't get, the Google search doesn't see everything that is in a database. It only sees like the stuff that is linked to somewhere. So that's sort of the way that databases work. And if you're just using the internet without databases, there's all sorts of information you're not having access to. So one of the search, like, I think like a good way to look at this is that there are one of the most useful databases. I think probably the most useful database for doing research is news databases. And like, I imagine many of you have used Google News Search. And when you use Google News Search, what it is doing is it is searching for like places on the internet where there are news articles, and it is pointing you to that article. So it's pointing you to CNN's website. But if CNN removes that article, Google News, maybe it'll point to it for a minute and they'll say, oh, there's nothing there, and it'll just take that article away. So information can disappear off Google News all the time. But a news database is one where the article is like a copy of the article that has been licensed, is held by that database, and it will never disappear. So it is a far more comprehensive way of searching the news. So there are many different types of news, many different news databases. Factiva, LexisNexis, there's a bunch of them. I'm using this one here called Canadian Newsstream. And if you look at the top, it says access provided by Toronto Public Library. So this is a subscription database, but I didn't pay any money. All I had was a public library card. If you are connected to a university, or if you have friends who are connected to a university, you can get access to some much better databases than this. I really like Factiva, but like this is the one that I have access to, and it is pretty darn good. So hold up one sec. Whoa, sorry, a little sneeze there. So like in this time, I've done this search and I put in Gustafsson Lake. So I'm searching for that, and you'll see like I have all the articles here, but I think this goes back to like maybe the early 90s with all the different articles that they've kept from all sorts of different newspapers all across Canada. And it's the full text of the search. So here we are in 1996, and there's an article that is about Gustafsson Lake from that point. So when I am doing comprehensive research, I usually skim through and open up all sorts of old articles, because knowing what was happening at a certain time is the best way to like really dive in there and get a sense of what is going on. The stuff that's on the internet now about the Gustafsson Lake standoff is going to be nowhere. It's not going to give you nearly the same sorts of information as what was happening day to day. Little tidbits will be in those newspaper articles that never got like brought into like recent information that's on the internet. So going through these old newspaper articles is where you get all sorts of like little bits of information that are like incredibly helpful. So I usually, like when I'm doing comprehensive research, I usually skim through titles that seem interesting, open up the articles, skim through them. When it's like really, really big topic, I'll try and narrow it down to specific years and times. But like, I'm going to say a news database is probably one of the best tools you can use for research, although I'm going to name some other best tools. So this is another website. I'll just show you these next ones. They're not in order, but I put them in the wrong order. But this database is in the slide. I've put some links to some specific websites. You can just click on those links and you'll visit these. Oh, these are more like open ones that are on the internet. So this one is searching Canadian government access to information requests. So free information requests that have been released by the Canadian government in the last 2 years. So there was one request that related to Gustafsson Lake and like the apology in 1995 from the RCMP around what happened there. So there's 22 pages that were released, and it was released by the RCMP in August 2021. So, and you can also look at the file and it says A 2019. So it was filed in 2019. And so if you click on that link, it'll give you a thing, you fill out a form, and they will send you the document in the mail or over email. So that's it. And here's another example. I just used the word blockade. And in this case, there's a whole bunch more results, but you can also see like which Canadian government departments have released information related to the term blockade. So this is a way to search completed access information requests in Canada. And BC has a a tool for this. Ontario doesn't. I'm not sure about Quebec, but there are other tools and databases that do some of this stuff. And then I think, wow, I'm gonna try and find, okay, one sec. No. Oh, sorry. This went really wrong. Okay. No. Yes, here we are. Okay, so I wanted to move this slide. It didn't get moved. I said before, there's two search bars on this. There's the one at the top that says Wayback Machine, and then there's this other one below that says search. If you put things in that search bar, you will get different types of information. So this group, archive.org, they save all sorts of information that isn't just websites. They save movies, they save books, they save television shows, they have radio, they have like weird computer games, they just chronicled, and they're trying to store all the information that they can on their website and make it accessible to everyone for free. So that is their goal. And the way you search other types of information on this tool, I'm gonna now scroll through again. Sorry, yeah, here we go. Is when you put stuff in that search bar, you get this. It comes up, you can search whether you're searching the metadata of the text, the metadata of the document, text content, you can search TV captions, radio, so all sorts of things like this. And in this case, we have, you know, searching Gustafson Lake, and there's all sorts of different publications that they have stored. And then you'll see different years that they have them stored from. So they have, you know, different things from different years. And some of these might be just books that you have to sign out through some sort of library system. Some of them are open and you can just view them. They're usually in different formats. There's a lot of information stored there. Here's the similar search. I did CIA in Canada, and you'll start seeing like various different documents. There's a lot of like declassified CIA documents that have ended up on this site. There's all sorts of information that's on this database. So that's archive.org. And then this is one that's called Canley, and this is just like Canadian legal cases. So in this case, I searched Gustafson Lake, and that term shows up in 30 cases and 5 like legal commentaries, sort of articles about the law that are saved in this database. But you can read like what a judge wrote in a case, and often that's a way to like find all sorts of useful information. And you know, I did another search, Cemeteries Act, First Nation, and found like different, you know, different articles. I didn't show it in these slides, but you click on jurisdiction, you can get a list of the different parts of Canada and which level of court the documents are from. But this is a way to search legal documents, like not legal documents, but rulings, legal case rulings made by like judges. And sometimes the laws are in there too. And then one other tool I find really useful is this one, WorldCat. And WorldCat is a catalog of libraries from around the world. So I often, when I'm trying to find complicated, hard to find publications, I often search in here, and they'll say like, oh yeah, this is available in like the Saskatoon library and a library in Los Angeles. Like it's like really hard to find, but it'll tell me which libraries and which one's closest to me. And sometimes I'm like, oh, it's in Halifax. I'll see if I can find someone in Halifax who can visit the library and get the document I want for me. But it's not like super up to date. I find librarians do not like that I use this site. They find it frustrating. But as a user, it's a way to like not be searching one library system, but to be searching all the library systems at once and getting like publications, books, things like that. When I'm looking into stuff, like trying to really deeply track down hard to find documents, I find this tool has been quite useful. So yeah, so those are the basics of like a few research tools. Hopefully everyone has got like a few things in there that they can use, that they find are helpful. I'm gonna just pause for a sec, and then I have like more like theory and ideas, but I just want to look at our how are we doing time-wise?
We're fine. Keep going. We'll take questions when you're done.
Okay,
If anyone needs to leave, they
So,
can leave. No problem.
Yeah.
Go for it.
wonderful. Just wanted to check in, make sure. I know I'm going a little fast here. I don't want to like, bombard people, but I will, well, how do I do this? So, I feel like now I've gone through, I've shown some tools people can use online, some different techniques. I think it's like, now let's like slow down a little and I'll talk about some of the like thoughts and thinking about like what it means to be a good researcher online. So, I said like understanding what sorts of information exist on the internet and how it is compiled and organized. I think that also means understanding what sort of information does not exist on the internet. Like that's a useful skill to think about, is like, what isn't there? Because we see, oh, there's so much, but knowing what isn't there is useful as a researcher. And then understanding how you can access the information. So I've gone into some bits of that. There's obviously a lot more that you can like learn and hone in how to access information. We've talked about how search engine works. I think you want to like think a bit about like word choice when you're using a search engine. So it's like, do you want to say broken arm or do you want to say fractured arm? They're going to give you like different types of results. So being like creative in how you use words and like playing with the words, changing things up, looking for different ways. When I am doing online research, I open a lot of tabs. And basically I'm like going through, I don't do one page at a time. I'm opening a few pages that I find interesting, and then I'm going and reviewing those pages. One of the most useful tools in a web browser is using find. So I think it's like Command F or Control F for most things, or you can go into the search bar, but like into the file, edit, find, or I don't know how it all works in all the different browsers. I can't say, but like you can look for a specific word anywhere on a page. So you might have a 400-page document that's one web page. This is 400, like thousands of words. Look for the terms that are most interest to you and quickly scroll through and get a sense of like, what is going on in this document? Is this useful for me? How is it useful for me? The way I think about when I'm looking at web pages, I guess I look for clues on credibility and context, but I approach it as if like, no one source is 100% credible. I'm trying to piece together all the pieces and make my own judgments of what is going on by like looking at the range of different answers, not being like, this is a credible, oh, this is New York Times, I'm going to believe this. This is an independent website, I won't believe it. But looking for the context and trying to gain your own understanding of what is going on so you can know what is and isn't credible. Although knowing like what the New York Times is and knowing that the New York Times is the New York Times and what kind of stuff they do, it does give you clues. So you want to look for those clues of like how you can understand what is going on. And there is a certain amount of like corroboration, fact checking, like that goes into like, making sure information is how you think it is, or like you see a fact, maybe double check it. That sometimes comes up. And like, I think I said this before, but like, sometimes the range of varying answers gives you more information than one answer. We looked at like Saturn has star moons, and like the first page of search results said 82, 83, 53, over 60. Those are the first 5 results or whatever gave us that. So it's like, that is clearly something where like the answer is not simple. So anyone who says 83 and anyone who says 53, they're both maybe right in some way or wrong in some way, but you get the full picture by looking at the range. And then when you are doing research, like you're really like often dealing with like too much information, and you have to figure out how to like refine your searches, triage, like figure out what's going to work. Sometimes when I'm doing research, I'll be like digging and not finding things. I'm trying to track down a person. I can't find them. I'm trying to understand something. And it's just like, I'm hitting a wall. And it's often good to like rethink your questions. You've kind of built up your search of like what you're looking for. And you can sometimes just take that back and like try and come up with a different way to approach it. This includes like switching the way you think, trying a different tactic. So I remember this story once where some university students were trying to track down the dean of York University. I think it's the dean, the chancellor, the person in charge of York University. And they couldn't find them, but they asked me to help. And I was like, well, I can't find them either. But what I'm going to do is, like, they were looking for their address. And I was like, well, I can't find their address, but I'm going to look up their name with wife, spouse, is married to, married, son, daughter, child. Look for these words. And I was quickly able to find their wife's name. And then when I looked for where she lived, I was able to find a city, and then I could go into the property records, like an in-person government office, and pull information from there and figure out exactly where they lived. And people, like, I don't know, I think they were talking to the chancellor's neighbors about something and trying to, I don't know. But like the point was that, like, by searching for the person, you're trying that one thing, it was hitting a dead wall. It's like switching it up and looking as if it's stored somewhere else. It's stored under the wife's name. So that's a different way to approach things. I think, like, when you're doing this stuff, it's not always just like, what information are you looking for, but who might link to the information that you want. And then I've said, like, oh, you know, rethink your questions. Sometimes you just need to, like, put things away for the day, table them, and when you start from scratch the next day, like, more information will appear and allow you to, like, keep approaching things, take different approaches. And like that, all that rethinking happens well when you just say, hey, let me put this aside for some time. So those are different ways to, like, look at this kind of information. And then there's also this question of like I said, like, this is the ways to being a good online researcher, but I think, like, part of it is knowing when to get off the internet, because the internet is not the, like, be all and end all of all research. There's lots of other types of research. And when I think, like, being good at online research is knowing the limits of online research, and that online research is not the only way to approach things. So I think I'm now going to talk about some of the beyond online research things. I think I earlier said that I thought news databases were, like, the #1 tool for doing, like, research. I'm like, as I was saying, I was like, wait, later you're gonna say telephones are the #1 tool for doing research. So basically, like, when you are doing research, like, one approach is to, like, look online. But another approach is to ask people, talk to experts, talk to people who know. And it's probably something that's going to get you more information is using the telephone than is using the internet. It doesn't mean don't use the internet, but, like, that the telephone is where the really good stuff is going to get. The stuff that you won't find online is the stuff you're going to find on the telephone. The aspect of it that's important, like, at this, like, 101 research level, is that, like, it is intimidating to pick up the phone and talk to people. I find it intimidating. I think there are maybe, like, journalists who are super seasoned and are like, whatever, it's not a big deal. But, like, I'm gonna, like, acknowledge, I find it scary. And what I've realized is that, like, there's a certain degree of, like realizing that I have a certain amount of legitimacy, and that I can just call people up and I don't have to, like, have a lot of backstory of why I'm asking questions. I can just say, I was working on some complicated property research recently that went far beyond what was available in the land registry office. There were weird, like, notes in property files, and I called up the Ontario Land Surveyors Association and started asking them my questions. And I just said, hi, I'm a researcher. And then I just asked them, they didn't say, where are you a researcher from? What's the purpose? I just approached it with confidence, and they were like, hey, what can we do to help? And I couldn't believe how helpful they were. They sent me, like, copies of surveys of the area I was interested in. Like, they really like just showed up and helped me. And I think approaching things and just showing up and asking really does open doors. I feel like there's a lot of people who want to go like the kind of like sneaky route with stuff where they come with a fake backstory of who they are. And I tend to just try and be like, use a version of the truth. I might not say everything that's going on, but I'm like, keep it really simple and just be straightforward. And like, one of the things I noticed with this is like, I would always be nervous to pick up the phone. But once I started picking up the phone and asking, people just do answer and they do give you information. And like, I have a investigative journalist friend and we'll just like bike around, I live in Toronto. So we'll like bike around Toronto and we'll be like, curious about a piece of property. And one of us will be like phoning the number that's listed on the like property developers information. The other will be like knocking on the doors of neighbors and being like, hey, what do you know? And like, now that I'm good at like asking questions, like knocking on people's doors and being like, hey, I'm interested in this property. What can you tell me about it? People love, like, sometimes it's awkward. I'm not going to say there's never awkward things, but like, it's a great way to find out information is asking, talking to people. And then this is like the 101. So like, I'm not going to get too much into this, but there is like an aspect of like how you talk to someone who doesn't want to talk to you. And there are ways of like being relentless. And it's like, I was talking to a journalist once and he was trying to get an interview with the director of a hospital. And the director of the hospital said, there's no way I will ever talk to you. And every day for like 2 months, he called either someone who was one of the like at the director level of the hospital or someone who was on the board of directors and says, I'm trying to get this interview. Can you help me? And just called like all the people below this person and all the people above this person and just stayed at it. And one day the person just cracked and was like, fine, I'll just give the interview. So there's lots of ways to like be relentless and persuasive. But I mean, this is a 101. And like, I'll just say like, be creative. And there are ways to get people to talk to you, but it's hard and complicated. Or it can be hard and complicated, but like try the basics approach and just asking, phoning, ringing. It is scary to call people. Practice. You see, like I said, I see the board with the developer sign. Just see the number, phone the number and talk. It's not the end of the world to phone and have a weird conversation. Just be like, hey, I'm curious about this. It gets you in the habit of using the telephone. And then one of the great tools for research is archives. So oftentimes people think about archives as like, there's like federal archives, provincial archives, municipal archives, universities have archives. There's like some independent organizations like have archives, corporations have archives. So there's lots of people who archive files, but one of the ways to think about this is less like, hey, I'm looking for what exists in the federal archives, but it's more to say like, what are the like, who are the people who are interested in this subject that I'm looking at, who would have had records? And then what happened to their records? So some of those records might have been destroyed, but like, you know, I'm working on stuff around Grassy Narrows. There was Emmett Hall, this judge. He donated his records and we looked him up and I was like, oh, he donated his records to the University of Saskatchewan. And then I called them up and they have an archive. They sent me a finding aid. I went through it all and got all sorts of records from them. I didn't know to look in Saskatchewan, but it's like I followed him and looked for where his papers ended up, and they ended up in this archive. But some people, maybe their papers are in their attic still, or their children have them in their attic, or, you know, there's all sorts of different ways that happen. But people often hold on to information and you're trying to say, hey, where did the papers of this person end up? Where have they gone? So that's the other way to approach it, is less like look at the specific archive and search their database. And then in terms of like finding collections, these two top searches, this is the first one's the Canadian version, and the second one is like, it's the US version, but has a little bit in Canada. These are databases where you can search a term and it searches numerous archive databases. So instead of searching like one database, it says, hey, let's look at all the like names of collections in, maybe 200 different archives across Canada. So it's not all the archives in Canada, but it's a good collection of them. A lot of university database like archives, things like this, and you can find lots of different information in there. And the archive grid is like the same, but for the US and a bit of Canada. And then you'll see this other thing I put at the bottom was search terms. And so I'll say, I'll pick the person or subject I'm looking at, and I'll do a search like archive or collection or font or finding aid or a different spelling of finding aid. So these are all words that appear when you're searching for archives. So I will do this kind of search, and I might do a lot of looking, but I could, come up with something where I will find, oh, look, I'm looking for this, retired politicians' files, and they've shown up in this archive. Because we often look and we're like, I find when I was first doing this stuff, I would be like, look in the Ontario archives or look in the federal archives, but I wouldn't know that a lot of the federal files end up in like university archives because people donate them. So it's a way to like track down stuff that isn't just at those levels. And there's often like, well, there's all sorts of stuff in archives. You get these boxes, you go through them, but you often can find useful information by like broadening the way you think about archives and how to track down information. Using information requests, I'm not going to go too in depth into this, but this is like a tool that exists where you can usually send, it's usually like a $5 filing fee. You send it to a government department, you say, I'm looking for this information, here's the time ranges of what I'm looking for. And under these like legislations, governments are supposed to get back to you with information. Sometimes they find, the laws are written that they have ways where they're never going to give you the smoking gun, and they have some outs where they can say, oh, we're not going to release this or that. But like, it's a tool for getting like, sometimes you get the smoking gun, very rarely, but it often gives you like bits and pieces of a situation, some context, some information around it. It takes several months. You have to track your information, keep track of this stuff, but it's a way to access like government records. And the idea is that like the information that belongs to the government is the people's information, and everyone should have access to it. But at the same time, you don't want to have like the plans to the nuclear power plant be something you request from the government. That shouldn't be everyone have access to it. That's kind of like the basic idea. There's a lot to say about it, so I'm just giving the very, very quick version.
Hey, Tim, can I just let people know that we had a training with Kevin Walby, who's one of the leading experts on ATI and FYs, and we have a whole page on our website under the resources he gave us, including the recording of his training he gave us. So if anyone wants to know more about that method, check that
out. It's just there's a lot to say, and I don't want to get into all of it, so I'm sure Kevin said it really well. I will direct questions on Foy to watch his video. I guess like I talked a little about like doing online research, but some like things about like the investigative mindset is like, you want to tell them these approaches and like brainstorm like all the ways of finding answers to your question. Like, who are the people who know? What are the different ways to find out? Like really come up with like lots of different ideas of how you might access to it. And then like, who are all the people who know and under what circumstances will they tell you? Like trying to come up with ways to like be creative in how you do this. And then it's like, what resources exist that will help you get closer to your answer? So are there ways to like find, sorry, been a long workshop. I'm not coming up with a good example of that, but yeah, like, are there tools? Are there associations? Are there like, different ways that you can learn about the thing? So sometimes you have to familiarize yourself with the topic and learn all the new terminology before you can ask the question in such a way that it'll get you the answer. And then like a big thing is, who can you ask for help? So like, this isn't about you being the best researcher who has all the tools on your own. Like often I'm reaching out to people and saying, how do I do this? What do you think about this? I've built up you know, a few people who I'm like, I go to and bounce my ideas off of. We have like a good degree of like confidentiality where like they can ask me things and I won't share it. I can ask them things and they won't share it. But like, I know people who can like know a lot of different research things, but you want to figure out like, who can I ask for help on these different projects? So maybe there's a librarian. Maybe you can email me and like, I'll put my email at the end. You can be like, hey, what do I do in this situation? I don't have time to give a few hours to everyone in the workshop, but I'm like, feel free to ask. And when I have time, I'll point you in the right direction. So it's like looking for these kinds of ways. Who are the other people you can ask? Who's going to be able, who knows the situation well? Who are the experts? Who can introduce you to the experts? So thinking through like this sort of thing where you're not just like, hey, it's me on my own, but who's going to be able to like help you be a good researcher? Who's going to be able to help you orient yourself to a new field? And like, I feel like this maybe is what I'm saying already, but like restated, I'm like, be creative. Try and like, I think of this as like research as a creative activity. Like there's a lot of like note taking and like entering spreadsheets and being meticulous, but like the actual like tracking down information, that is a creative process. Refining, thinking, like imagining ways to get at things. So I think I said ask for help. And then another part of this is that like when you're doing research, you often have to like jump into a field you know nothing about and quickly orient yourself to the degree that you could like talk to an expert and not be like embarrassing yourself, or not be like, man, you wouldn't embarrass yourself, but like that's not what I meant to say. You want to be able to jump in, talk to an expert, and like have them be able to like know and understand your questions in such a way that you can talk to them at their level, but get information at the level that you're at, but like yeah, quickly orienting yourself. So like I feel like, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So I think we'll see where we're at with time, but I'm gonna like end it there, and we can do a Q&A, and there's just like a couple other slides of like different tools that it's kind of not that worked out, but like if people have questions, we can talk about whatever the questions are, or if people want to hear about some other tools, we can talk about other tools. But I have, you know, a bit more energy in me for a few Q&As, and then we'll just check in and see where it's at. In theory, I could go a bit longer if people have like more in-depth stuff, but I'll see where my energies are at. But I think I will close this. And am I still sharing my screen? Stop screen share. So I've stopped sharing my screen. I can go back to that and open up Google and show examples, but I will put that there for now. And hopefully people have gotten some stuff from the workshop and learned a few things. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. So much information. I feel really empowered to know all those things. There's like a million things in there I've wanted to know and didn't know, and now I know. So let's take questions. We can go back and forth between people in the Zoom and people in the room. Let's start with, are there any people who are ready to unmute themselves on the Zoom and ask a question? Yeah.
Oh, I'll just jump in. I said this at the beginning, but I'm just posting a link to the presentation one more time, people who showed up late. So you can just access the presentation, and, you know, I'll leave that link there. You can just go and look at it anytime, and it's available for you.
Fantastic. Someone just asked in the chat. Yes, we are recording, and we'll be sharing it on Research at the Frontline's website, as well as on the Facebook event page, probably by tomorrow. Let's take our first question from Jamie. Go ahead, Jamie, and yourself.
Hi, thanks. That was really cool. I was wondering, for the online research, is there a way that you like document your process or your methodology as you're going through all of the like URL hacking and all of the different like techniques that you talked about, like either for yourself just to keep track and remember what you've already tried, or like to remember how you found a certain document and like how you organize like your data and like how you keep track of what you've been doing?
I wish there was like a simple answer. There's sort of like a trade-off, because like if you like, I'm doing some stuff where I'm preparing things for lawyers and I have to like you know, each document I'm using, I have to like be like, here are the people in the document, and here's like a summary of what's in it, and here's where the document was accessed from, and here's the like year it was from, and like it takes a lot of time to fill out that spreadsheet. And on that project, it's like really like that is what I have to do for that project. But I don't, it's not my favorite project. Like that's not the favorite part of my project, because I'm like, oh, I'm spending so much time, and I'm a space cadet, so it's really hard for me. And I'm like spending a lot of time on that, but and I'm missing out on like other parts. Like I'm less doing the research and I'm more doing like the data entry. But it is useful. Like it's like clear that like keeping a spreadsheet where you track all that information is a useful tool. But like project to project, I will gauge which tools to use. One that I use a lot is a chronology. So when you're dealing with these sorts of things, keeping a chronology of when different things happened. I mean, it depends on the project, is definitely like a useful tool. So like a tracking spreadsheet for documents is a tool, a chronology is a tool, maybe like just a document of notes of like keeping track of like the broader things of a topic. So I usually have like I usually when I'm working on a project, I'll be like working and collaborating with people or sharing stuff. And I usually have a document that's like just for me, where I keep all my notes and links to all the different documents I have that I just, it's not for public, but I just scratch pad it. And then it shows me, someone's like, oh, we need this thing. And I'm like, oh, I have my Google Doc that has just all my links to documents. I'm like, oh, here's the spreadsheet. Let me send that to you. So yeah, that's the other tool. Those are the three tools that come to mind. But I would also be like, I'm not the best on the organizational front.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Nice. Is there someone in the room in Montreal who has a question? Show of hands.
By the way, I didn't get to unmute the audio fast enough to catch the big round of applause that we got in the room here, but that did happen.
Wonderful.
So if anyone has a question, they can either come up here and ask it because the microphone is here. Does anyone have a question? Or they can pass it on to me and I can do that to you either way. It's fun.
Okay. I have a really big one.
Yeah.
I can ask it here if you can hear me. I just wondered if all of these.
We can't hear you. Can you come closer to where Keith is, please?
Yeah, you can sit down.
Hi, mine's like a basic and technical question, but we were talking about all of these sort of search terms that we can use, like the sites and the file extensions. Are those specific to Google, or are those sort of universal, and do they work across all the different search engines?
So the way I think about search engines, I know there are like many search engines. I tend to think of it that there's Google and Bing, because they're the ones that do their own I mean, Yandex and stuff, some of them also do their own crawling of the web. But when you get a search engine like DuckDuckGo, it's just using Google information, but processing it differently. And it's useful how it's processing it differently, but it's like the actual information comes in the form of like that they're gathering different parts of the internet, seems to be Google and Bing. So like that's generally how I think. There's a few exceptions. Like if we have more time, it gets a little more complicated. But because what you need in a search engine is getting like vast amounts of like you don't want a search engine that's like has really good display but doesn't visit as many web pages. You want the one that visits many web pages, because that's what you're doing for, is to get as much information as you can, not to have the best ethics or the best display or the best these other things. So within that, Google and Bing have very similar but not identical operators. So you can look up for each of them and get a list. And I feel like there's a few that, like, it's been a while since I've been up on this, but there's a few that Bing has that are like missing from Google. Like I think Bing has one that says, show me all the pages that link to this page, which can be really useful. I think there's a couple others that like do things differently. There's a few search engines that do like fuzzy search. But I think Bing and Google don't. But like fuzzy search is like, oh, I misspelled it, but I'm gonna say like, and maybe Bing does, but it's like, oh, it's like this. It's kind of pronounced like this. So like those are really cool, and they definitely exist for databases, some sorts of database searches. Fuzzy search is great, but I don't think Bing always has it. Like Google doesn't have fuzzy search. So I would look up those and check, but they're not exactly the same, but cite colon minus or quotes, file type, I think they work on most search engines.
Fantastic. Good question. I've been wondering that too, Becca. Good one. Okay, we have a question back in the Zoom. So Simona, go ahead with your question.
Hi there, Tim. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I'm wondering how I can disengage the mechanism that collects user data when I download a document online. So like a PDF, maybe a piece of research, something like that.
Sorry, what mechanism collects the data? Like
So
what?
you know when you download, let's say I was on the government database and I downloaded some documents from their collection, and then I'm using it on my computer now. But then I save it as a PDF, maybe it's something like that. But then there's a mechanism that actually saves and monitors if I'm opening it, because I think what the intention of it is to make sure that for things that are licensed, that's not being shared or whatnot, if it's not allowed, but it's still collecting my user data in opening it, where my location is, things like that. Is there a way
So
to
like,
that?
I feel like I'm like I don't worry about this so much in the type of stuff I do. So I don't have like the exact answer, but I have like an analogy or like a similar sort of thing, which is that many times you'll get an email, and when you open the email, there'll be like a pixel, like a single white pixel in the email that's an image. And so it pulls from a server. And that pixel is pulling from a specific part of the server where it's tracking your specific email and saying, oh, this person opened this email. So like sometimes when you open an email, it'll pull from the server for this picture and it says, hey, this person opened this, so that you can track who's opened an email. So that's a service that like, if you want to do it, I think you can do it, but it's mostly done by like big companies or like, organizations track in that way. And so I would say like, I don't have a specific answer that I'm 100% sure on this stuff, but I would imagine that you could like it's doing, I imagine it's doing something similar, which is that it's sending information over the internet. So turning off your Wi-Fi signal when you are opening the document may be something that stops that. But because I'm not like totally up on this situation, I don't want to be like I think it's like, maybe it's inappropriate in a security thing to be like, oh, I think this works. So I would guess that works, but I'm like, you need to, I'm going to say I don't know the answer so that you don't like take what I say at like 100% trust.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Can I follow up with another question?
Absolutely.
Piggybacking. This is a little bit also a little bit after what you were talking about, but when you're able to, now that I've got the information that I'm looking for, is there a search process or a database process that you're able to go through to verify copyright, to make sure that you're not going to be in trouble with using the data afterwards once you finally found it? Is there a research process to go about to, because there's all different kinds
So
of.
it depends what you're using it for. Like, let's say you found an image or footage that you were going to like include in a film. You would have to like clear the rights and get I forget, EAO, something, some sort of like insurance for like using it. Like there's a process for doing visual research where you do like clear the rights for information. But if you're doing like research reports and you're like, hey, I'm providing like an activist group on information about Enbridge, you don't have to like call up Enbridge and say, oh, I got this information off your website. Is it okay if we include it in the report? Like you're trying to document things that are going on. So like using information that you find in a document is usually okay. I think like sometimes people try to like limit the amount that they quote from a document because of like copyright stuff when it gets republished and stuff. But I feel like that gets more into publishing stuff. I will say that I believe in Google image search, there is, you can search specifically for images that are like in the Creative Commons on different licenses. And if Google image search, I know they used to have that. If they no longer have it, there are places where you can search for Creative Commons content. And there are places where you can search for content and then purchase the rights. So those exist, but it's less for like using a document than it is for using photos and video and audio.
But for documents that are like in, let's say like government records, so for example, they're government documents or they were retrieved from a access information request. So it's owned by the government, but it's meant to be a public record.
Yeah, then it's a if it's released through a free information request, there's no way that you should not be allowed to use that in like in your research.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much for your time.
Like, I mean, like if government people are like, you can't use this and are getting into it, like maybe there's some legal thing that I don't know, but like I just treat it unless someone is saying otherwise, I consider that like open.
Thank you for that question, Simona, and thanks Sim for the answers. Let's go back to the room. Is there anyone in the room with a question?
Yeah, we got one.
Great, come on up.
Feel free to introduce yourself.
Sorry. Hello. Well, I have two questions mainly. So the first one, like when we use like archive.org, some of like the files and documents that we find are actually not searchable, and they are pretty long. So like, what's the
Sorry, I'm sorry. Say it again.
Okay, so like if like archive.org has like some archival documents, and they are like a copy of the text and not the text itself. So how so they are not searchable, like the PDF itself is not searchable. So how to find like the information that you want inside that document like quickly without reading like 400 pages?
So the way, I'll just do this real quick, screen share. So tell me if I am like, tell me if I am misunderstanding this, but let's go. You want to shout out a topic? It doesn't have to be the one you use, but like.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say. Hyperwash, I don't know how to spell. Okay, so in this case, we've searched the term hyperwash. This is the metadata, so it's like stuff that's in like the heading, the title, the author, and then we can do like a text search for the same thing. There should be more results. Might take longer. But I'm just gonna like open a few of these documents so we can just like look at them. Oh, sorry. Oh, here we go. Okay, so normally when you open the document, like you'll get something like this. So here's the book. It seems like in this book, we're only going to get like a few bits, and then I can click borrow. I have an account. You can see I'm logged in. I can borrow for an hour, and then I can, at that point, once it's borrowed, I can use this search bar and search the text of the book. But I don't know why books in archive.org wouldn't have that, but usually, whoa. I was going to show you guys something and I'm not seeing it.
They have a text version probably.
Oh, it's because it's a book like this. Okay. I'm looking for one that isn't borrow. This one is not a borrow book. So once you borrow it, you should have access to this. But within this, you have like the text. You should be able, usually you can search like within the text. So we'll be like, I don't know. And then it will search in this document. Okay. Well, none of these are coming up, but Ipperwash came up for whatever this is. Oh, this is like some weird, I don't know. But then you have this thing at the bottom that says like all of these, and this one says full text. So when you click on this, the format is really weird, but you should be able to use Command F and then search like within that and search to any through the text part of the document. So sometimes this should be searchable in this other bar if I go back, but this is the stuff that is searchable within a archive.org document. And you can search it also using this bar here. And it should bring you to the actual page that what was I did 10. So yeah, it is less is coming up on this, you're right, than in doing that text search for the text part of the document. But in this, you can see the diagrams and all that stuff. So that is a thing. Did I answer your question or did I misunderstand it?
No, I think it's answered. And
Okay.
I have like one more question.
Yeah.
In the URL, there are like some unified information. So for example, government, like the abbreviation, if it's like .gov, Canada is .ca or like GA.
Yeah.
So like, do you have like a website or like a place where we can find this unified information? Like
Okay, I understand what you're asking. So I feel like the skill is figuring out how to find them. But for like I think for government websites, it should be fairly simple. You just type government Manitoba and it's like, oh, gov.mb and you're like, okay, I'll just use that. So I feel like it's more it didn't make sense for me to like include a list because each time it'll be like unique of like, oh, I'm looking at this region of France or whatever. And then you have to like learn it again. So the skill is less to like there probably are, like if you want to find all the top level domains for every country, there's a Wikipedia page that has that. So there are these lists. So you could find the lists, but I think it might be even quicker to be like search Haiti top level domain than it would be to find the list and look up Haiti.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Brent here in Zoom.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Tim. That was an amazing presentation and lots of really good information and tools that I'm eager to try out. I wanted to ask just on I was kind of fascinated by the slide that you had about sort of triaging information, and you were talking about having multiple tabs open at the same time. And it sort of made me think that maybe you have a process of maybe kind of making like a quick determination whether this document or this source is going to be useful or not. And it just kind of made me think about time expectations, time management, time efficiency, how to avoid rabbit holes, or being okay that maybe one has spent, a number of hours and it hasn't, kind of advanced your work. So I don't know, it just made me think if you had any sort of tips or advice or guidance about, no one having infinite time, and probably most of us working on sort of maybe a set number of hours or a deadline, and how you navigate maybe that reality of I have 6 hours to find this, or I have 2 weeks or whatnot. So thank you.
So I think it's like, I don't have like a clear answer, but I think it's like you, based on like the time you have, you like pick the strategy and the techniques you want to try. And like, there's things where it's like I get caught up in the hunt where people are like, hey, can you find this information for me? And I'm like, when I can't, I'm like, some part of me is like, oh no, I haven't figured it out in the first 20 minutes. Now my like whole day is going to be like, even if I put it aside, the back of my brain will be like, where can I find that? Like it hooks me when I can't find the information. And so like that goes on with me. But like, there's obviously like a version of research where you look up the Wikipedia article and that's as far as you go. And so like, that is like valid for many projects. And so I think it's like determining like, hey, is this the project where I want to look at the news database, or is this the project where I want to just look at the Wikipedia article? Because you can't do like really, really in-depth research quickly, because that's not how it works. But you don't have to always do really, really in-depth research. So I think that would more be like how I would think of it. And I do think like shelving projects, taking breaks, like rethinking how you're looking at it is like the other part of that. But I feel like if you're looking for an expert in time management, I am not them.
Thanks, Brent. Maybe we'll go one more back to the room and see if anyone, any last question, and then I think we should probably try to wrap things up and give Tim's brain a break. Any last question in the room? You're allowed to, Keith.
Yeah, no, we got one
Oh,
though.
great, thanks.
Last question, it's like specific tech things, actually in relation to the previous questions that I thought I could share. That's all right. Okay. Hi, Tim, it's Cleve.
Hey!
Hey. Good to see you. So maybe I'll look that up. The kind of going backwards in order of the people, what people have asked, for documents that are an image of a document, but not the actual text, which seemed to be what the archive.org thing was about in part. The process of turning an image of text into text you can search is optical character recognition, OCR.
Yeah.
So you can look up OCR tools or OCR services to like convert it, and then you can translate it or do whatever else, or copy paste it where you want. Or Control F is the most useful thing. You can search it. And then for the PDF thing about how to open a document that you don't trust, that may do something like, especially PDFs can do tracking of where you are on the internet. They can also just have malware in them really easily. It's like one of the more common malware vectors. And Tails is a really easy to use Linux operating system running off a USB key, TAILS. And that puts everything through Tor, and it's completely separate from your main computer system. It's really isolated. So that's useful for a whole bunch of things that involve tech security, but specifically for opening a document that you don't want to be connected to you or mess up your computer, it's really good. And for the origin of an image thing, like which I think is a useful search technique in itself, of like where if the key thing you're finding is the image and where does that image come from, you can do a reverse image search, which Google Images has, but then there's also TinEye. And so you can put in search for the image and see where else that is on the internet. And I haven't used it much, but I've read that now you can do facial recognition reverse image search, especially on Yandex, that
oh, really?
Search engine. Yeah, apparently it does it more than the other ones. And so you put in a face and it finds other images that have that face in it, which is very creepy and kind of terrible, but possibly useful as well. And then the last thing I was going to mention that doesn't come up often, but occasionally it has for me, and it's useful, is if you're searching for a term and it's showing up in the search engine, but then when you Control F, it doesn't show up on the site. You can do the view source of the page, and then that shows you the actual like HTML content of the site. And usually it's the robot is seeing everything in the source, and so it's pulling it up, but it's not appearing. So when you do the Control F, it doesn't show up. But it'll if it showed up in the search engine, it'll usually show up in the source.
Or
then, yeah.
Or it could show up in the anchor text, which is like, I tried not to get super complicated in like the understanding search engines and stuff, but like Google doesn't just provide results based on the page, but they also provide results based on pages that link to the page. So if you have a page that says, here's a like photo of a duck, and then the web page is just a duck, but the word duck is never on it, they'll look at the text that's connected to the link that says duck and then include duck in the page. So that's another way that like those search engines, and I feel like the algorithm over time is getting more complicated, but I feel like everything Cleve has said is really like smart and on point. And several of them were things that I was like thinking of putting in the workshop, but I was like, this is getting too long. But yeah, those are all smart things. But if you had more, keep going.
No, that was it. It was ending
Okay.
on the look at the source of the page, and then that URL stuff you were talking about.
Yeah.
You can search the URLs that are the links on the page and see like quickly see what else it links to more than you could by like actually scrolling through and clicking on them and stuff. Just to,
Yeah,
thanks a lot. It was a great workshop, Tim.
great.
Perhaps it was starting to foreshadow to like a investigative research 2.1 or 201 after the 101. One day we might move on to that. So okay, let's start to shift into the after party. So that means going our separate ways on the internet. So the Zoom people, anyone who wants to stick around and chat a bit more, feel free to. And folks who are in the room, it's time to congregate on the back deck and eat some really amazing vegan food that Christiane made. If anyone in the room wants to stay and interact with the TV, you can. I might mute the room if it's bothersome to the Zoom people, but I just want to thank you so much, Tim. That was very, very, very useful. As I said several times, like a lot of the requests we're getting from frontline communities are really in the realm of investigative research. And so helping us skill up, be able to respond to those needs is like a really incredible offering. And we thank you for sharing your knowledge with us and the skills you've been building these years. Thank you so much. Okay. And thanks to everyone who showed up to all the research for the Frontlines volunteers. Thanks, Keith, my co-conspirator, for being in the room. Thanks, Christiane from the Social Justice Center for cooking and for hosting. And thanks to the Value Collective for making space for us. All right, folks, go eat. And Zoom people who want to stick around, I'm going to stick around and see who wants to chat. Bye, in-person room.
Bye.
Bye.